Before Cardinal Timothy Dolan was the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, he was the rector, the principal or president of the seminary, the Pontifical North American College Seminary in Rome. And he had the extraordinary honor of being over in Rome at the time that Padre Pio was canonized, which I can only imagine how crazy that city got during that time. That if you want to have just the tiniest bit of insight into how deep the Italian devotion to Padre Pio is, Cardinal Dolan said that he had a niece who was often sick, and so he had the Italian staff members at the seminary praying for her, and they would often ask up about her. And one time he asked them if they would please make sure to remember her to the Lord, to pray to Jesus for her. And they said, "Oh, don't worry, Your Eminence. We're going to go to the heart of the matter. We're going to bring her straight to Padre Pio." But since he was the rector of what was realistically the largest body of Americans in Rome, they wound up hosting a fairly large after party for the canonization. And a lot of people in the city, Americans in the city, came, and he got to meet an elderly man who was a vet, a World War II vet, who had the opportunity to meet Padre Pio during his life. And he shared with Cardinal Dolan a story. He told him that he was part of the landing party at Anzio Beach, for those of you who are at all familiar with some of the battles of World War II. And they had a little bit of leave when things calmed down a small bit. And so he and several of his friends wound up going to San Giovanni Rotondo, which is where Padre Pio was assigned. Many of his friends were going because they were faithful Catholics and they were excited to have the opportunity to meet a living saint. He was going largely because they were going, and because as an avowed atheist, he kind of just wanted to see what all the trouble was about. Who was this guy that everybody was talking about? And so they went to San Giovanni Rotondo. They had the opportunity to attend a very early mass, and because of how small the crowd was at that mass, each one of them had the chance to spend some time talking to Padre Pio after mass. And they knew at least a little bit of pidgin Italian. He was an Italian American, so his Italian was actually quite good. And at one point in the conversation, being a blunt, rash, headstrong 19-year-old American military personnel, he looks at Padre Pio and he says, "Show me your wounds." Because Padre Pio had been commanded by the bishop to cover them up with bandages and then wear gloves over them so that he wouldn't be a spectacle. They didn't want Padre Pio to be a circus act. And Padre Pio took it in stride, looked back at the guy, smirked just a little bit and said, "You first. You show me your wounds." And the guy responded, knowing enough Italian to know exactly what he asked, and said, "What are you talking about? Like, I don't pretend to bear the wounds of Jesus in my body. Like, I'm not going around, I'm not a charlatan who other people think is a miracle worker. You show me your wounds. You claim to have the wounds of Jesus in your body, prove it." And Padre Pio looked at him and said, "My friend, we all bear wounds, only some of them are visible." He said, "You've been carrying heavy wounds with you since you got here to Italy. It's time for you to show those to me. Then maybe I'll show you mine." And much to the confusion of his friends, the guy just starts bawling. Because when he landed in Anzio Beach, he landed with two of his best friends. The three of them stormed the beach together, and the two of them were clipped by machine gun fire, and both of them fell fairly quickly, but they weren't killed outright by it. And as he's continuing on, understandably trying to get out of the enemy fire, the two of them called after him, and they said, come back and get us, save us, help us. And he panicked, like he wasn't about to run back into enemy fire, and he was no medic. There was nothing he could do for them. Like he could go back and hold their hands and probably die with them. And so he just kept going. He ignored their pleas. He closed his ear to their cries and survived. But ever since that day, he blamed himself for that. He carried that with him and considered himself to be at least a little responsible for the death of two of his best friends. That was a trauma and a wound that he had carried with him since the day he got there. And he had not had the courage, the opportunity to share that with anyone yet. And for Padre Pio to call him out on that, it was like the floodgates broke, and the guy fell apart. That he had put on a really strong show, but behind all of that braggadocio and anger, there was a lot of brokenness. And so Padre Pio took this unbeliever to his confessional, and there they sat and talked for a long time. And he said that was a conversion experience for him, that he found Christ there and became, over time, I think, a practicing Catholic. Then in our gospel, Jesus shares with us the parable of the wheat and the weeds, or the wheat and the tares. And the thing about tares is that they're a particular kind of weed that looks exactly like wheat until it reaches final maturity. And it's only then that you can tell the two of them apart. You try to separate them too early in the season, you're bound to lose a lot of the good fruit too. Jesus tells us the parable is about us. We don't know which of us are the ones who are going to wind up going to heaven and which of us aren't. We don't know which of us are the good eggs and which of us are the bad eggs. And when we try too quickly to pass judgment on that before the final judgment, before Jesus himself does, we're liable to get things wrong. That World War II vet was no doubt seen as a lost cause by a number of people who knew him. That if many of us had looked at him, we would have thought he was one of the weeds and not the wheat. Jesus and Padre Pio knew better. But I think it's valuable for us to read this parable of our Lord Jesus as not merely outside in the body of the church, but also within our own hearts and in our own life experience. Because I think sometimes there are encounters we have, there are things that take place, traumas, failures, personality defects, that we see as the weeds or the tares in our hearts, that we hide them, we bury them under the social masks that we build for ourselves, that we presume that there is no good purpose that they serve, they cannot be turned to Jesus Christ, and yet it was precisely one of the most traumatizing experiences this man had in his entire life that opened him up to actually know the love of Jesus Christ in the encounter that he had with Padre Pio. That I've met more people than I can probably count who have found faith only because God allowed them to hit rock bottom. Sometimes rock bottom is precisely where Jesus is waiting for us. That we presume to know which things in our lives are good and which things in our lives are trash. But Jesus sometimes looks at them differently. And I think it's only when we're willing to stop hiding them and take the gloves and the bandages off of our own wounds and show them to Jesus Christ that he then is able to turn around and show us his wounds, from which all of the mercy and love and forgiveness of the Father is poured out to us.